You're listening to the Unshackle Your Life podcast with Debbie Colburn, the place to break through all of the hidden things that hold each of us back, things that scare us and things that challenge us, and things we're just plain fed up with. We talk all things money and business, big and small. We dive deep, we get real, and we get raw, discovering and exploring what is really possible for you. It's a restart. If you've ever struggled with shame, worry, or just plain self-doubt, if you've ever thought it's not enough when you looked at your bank account or your credit card, if you're sick and tired of living a cycle of crisis to crisis to crisis, no matter whether it's in your personal life, in your business, or your relationships, then this is where you need to be. We'll bring you new ideas, tips, and tactics, and connect you to the resources to get you unlocking your own shackles and release your unique abilities. No matter what's going on in your life right now, maybe you're in survival mode, just barely getting by, living day-to-day, paycheck to paycheck. Maybe you're in a job or a career or running a business that is leaving you on empty, depleted, uninspired, or anything in between. I've got your back. Ready? So buckle on up, take a deep breath, and join me in a conversation about jump-starting your life and breaking free of your shackles and create that thing that you've been scared to ask for. He didn't see it clearly enough after she attacked him the first time, at first. After the second time, and after the police asking him this time round if he'd like to file an assault charge, everything became clear to him. Toxic to the core. Now before we go on, the person in your circle who lights you on fire and you fire them up, that person who is your biggest fan and you are theirs, nurture that relationship. Curate better connections. Fuel it. Expand it. Grow it. Now, back to the boss, the coworker, the longtime friend, a teammate, coach, or mentor that doesn't fit that category. The ones who have slowly slid into the maybe I need to cut the cord group. Welcome to episode 82. We all have them. The person in your circle that makes you totally feel like crap, or that cuts you down. That one that's always telling you that what you're trying to do will never, ever work. The person that's like a leech sucking you dry in your money, in your energy, in your motivation, in your thinking. Or maybe it's simply that you no longer are headed in the same direction, that you've grown in different ways or apart, that you're struggling to cut the cords with. And I know this is a pretty rough way to start an episode, right? But I know that their name popped right into your mind immediately, didn't it? I was reminded just the other day, after a very, very unpleasant, angry, one-sided conversation, of one of the very first people in my circle, in my immediate family, that I cut loose forever. My ex-husband. And guys, there's a lot of you out there with those, and ex-wives, and ex-boyfriends, and ex-girlfriends. He is the extreme end of the scale, what we would all call toxic. And I'll explore some of the others here too. So this isn't going to be just a rant and a total people are bad for you episode. It totally isn't. So stay with me, but I've decided I'm going to give you some examples from my life because I find sometimes that works a little bit better. So this time I'm going to share a little bit more of my life. Angry. Chip on his shoulder, on both shoulders. Woe is me. Victim broke. That was him 35 years ago, and that is still him. It is a very, very powerful reminder of why I promised to never have anything to do with him after my youngest daughter turned 18. Divorce was the solution. And it took me a few kicks at the can to get to that point. But it's not always that clear-cut. And what if we can't see the effect they're having on us? You guys have all heard a little tidbits of my son's story of being abused by his now ex-wife, and how from the first moment I met her, my inner voice was telling me there was something wrong with her, that she had a secret she was hiding. And he didn't see it at first. He didn't see it clearly enough after she attacked him the first time. At first. But after the second time, and after the police asked him again if he'd like to file an assault charge, everything became clear. Toxic to the core. Now, before we go on, that person in your circle who lights you on fire, and you fire them up in a great way, that person who is your biggest fan, your biggest cheerleader, and you are theirs, nurture that. Curate better connections in it. Fuel it, expand it, grow it. Now, back to the boss, the coworker, the longtime friend, the teammate, the coach or a mentor, the ones who have slowly slid into what I call the category of maybe I need to cut the cord group. And you're thinking, seriously, Debbie, a coach or mentor? That makes no sense. Might have been immensely helpful in moving me forward. Me too. My friend. But we've been friends for a ton of years. I can't break it up now. I can't break up the band. We'll talk about that. My boss. I couldn't. I owe everything to them. They got me this position in the first place. Really? Or that coworker. And every time they're at a barbecue with you or whatever, your subconscious mind, your little voice is saying to you, why exactly are they in my circle in the first place? There's a very, very powerful saying. People come into your life for a reason. And some people come into your life only for a season or two. And not everyone is meant to be in your life for your whole life or for theirs. So at the opposite end of the scale from my ex are people who've been in your life for some period of time. Now that could be a whole bunch of years, or it could be just a few months. What about that person? Well, I think there are two key questions that everyone should ask themselves when they, and we'll talk about when they know or they have an inkling that something needs to change. The first one is, how do you know when it's time to take a break from someone? And the second one is it a permanent break, or is it just a pause? Or is it a pause that may well turn out to be a permanent break? And that's where you get the chance to explore your relationship with that person. And don't get hung up on the word relationship. Relationship is simply two people who have some form of connection. It's a relationship. And in my experience, it's been that you intuitively know that something needs to change simply when you think about them. So maybe you've met for lunch every week and lately you're feeling a little triggered, bored of it, or it feels wasteful of your time, or the conversations just seem to always flow to some form of conflict or disagreement on even the simplest of things. Or maybe the conversations are the same ones over and over and over, or the topics now just turn you off. Now, a perfect example of that is someone who can only talk about things in the past. And for me personally, and I think I might have talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but because I absolutely love possibility and the future, that's a place I rarely visit, the past, much less live there. It's funny. It's funny because I was sitting at dinner last night and we're having a really amazing conversation, and then my dad said, "Well, I'm going to go see if I can find the pictures of that." cool. They have lots of pictures, great, interesting sometimes to see them, but it's not something that I live and breathe for. So they went and they got a picture of me when I was 4 years old sitting on Santa Claus's knee, which obviously holds some sentimental value to them. That's fantastic. For me, it was like looking at a blank piece of paper. And then, so that continues on. And then as I'm working, trying to have a conversation on a support group that I'm working with, my mom walks into where I'm working and passes me the picture and the card, and my mom knows that I don't do the past. And it's like, okay. But that's exactly the scenario, and I'm not going to, discount my parents or anything like that. Love them dearly. But that's a perfect example of getting stuck in the past. So it's something that I'm very clear on. I'm very, very clear on, and I don't discount the past. There is a tremendous number of lessons to be learned from the past, but you don't have to live there. And I've set very tight boundaries around that. Another example from my life, and guys, ladies, remember that these are simply things from my own life to get you thinking about your life, about your business, and about your relationships. And what might not be right for me, like you might have already be triggered when I was talking about not living in the past. That thing that might not be right for me may be exactly perfect for you. So just listen to the stories, get the lessons, and then make some decisions for yourself. So relationships, connections in my world should inspire and support you, grow and move you towards what is possible for you. So for 15 years or so, my training partners and I together trained all of our dogs in the high performance dog sports, in agility in particular. And we worked through agility exercises, courses, skill building, and competitions. We knew each other's dogs from the day the dogs arrived as 8-week-old puppies into our lives until their very last days. So as you can imagine, over 15 years, dogs came and went. We could work with each other's dogs. We could compete with them. Elite canine athletes, all from different breeds. And as I built the Summit, and you've heard me talk about that, my 7,000 square foot training facility for performance dog sports, myself and one other member trained every week for 3 years. Worked the dogs in the seminars with international level coaches from all over the world. We hiked in the mountains here, and we grabbed lunch in the village and talked about all things we were learning about, and about life and business and careers. The others had long since faded away as life changes happen. We talked personal growth, money challenges, relationships, and dogs. Never kids. And that was an easy choice. She had none, didn't want any, and I rarely talk about my kids, and I rarely talk about my dogs in public, because that usually sends people off into some conversation about, my dog doesn't know how to sit, can you teach him? And it's like, it's not somewhere I ever want to go. She was there for me every time I needed to share my challenges and get an objective head, get an objective perspective. And I was there for her through her separation, through 3 subsequent moves, and the career changes, and the devastation of losing her older dogs. And then I started to feel it. It was subtle. I realized that most times we got together, it was because I suggested it. I realized that whenever something was going on in her life that she needed support for, I reached out. But when I needed it, she never did for me. It was like she was pulling away. And we've never talked about this, because obviously, as you'll find out, we cut the cord. But it may have been symbiotic. And I realized that she had come to a place she was comfortable with, which is fabulous for her, and that will happen in your life. But that place felt very wrong for me. It felt like hiding. And again, this is not any judgment. It's simply how it felt for me. And these are the things that you need to be aware of in your life as you're, curating your powerful team around you, supporters. I realized that in working through her stuff, she had become a champion and a voice for victims. And again, that's a much needed something that propels societal change. But for me, it bumped right up against my beliefs, my values, and my work in helping people get themselves out of the addiction to survival. To help people empower themselves. So I decided that it maybe was time to take a temporary break, which is something that I always recommend for people. Test it out for 30 days. Does it feel better without them in your life? I know this is more difficult with immediate family, but it's not impossible. Boundaries, limiting time, and events that you attend they'll be there. There are many, many ways. So I snoozed her on Facebook for 30 days. And then another 30. And then I unfollowed her. And then a couple of years later, so she still popped up a little bit in what I saw in her public posts, but then she posted about a major health challenge she was having with her only dog. And I bit. And the conversation was slightly strained, and I knew the break was going to be semi-permanent. And guys, I have to tell you that as someone who has a small but mighty circle, voluntarily removing one is never an easy choice. She is an example of the opposite end of the scale. Someone who is not toxic, she is someone who you simply have outgrown. So that's the scale ends. One is toxic to the core, and the other one is I've outgrown them. Or they've outgrown me. That is possible too. And the rest of that scale in between could be anyone. It could be any level of intensity of those coming down to the neutral point where it just doesn't do it for me. There's not anything inherently wrong with them. There's not anything inherently right with them. They just kind of ho-hum. Maybe we'll call that's the center of the scale. Ho-hum. And if you're in my world and you're trying to build, to reach your infinite potential, to figure out what's possible, what's truly possible for you, you can imagine that having a ho-hum in your life probably isn't going to help you in those steps forward. So that coach that you've outgrown, and maybe their expertise is working with people who are just starting their first business, and now you've got annual revenue just over $100K, and you're in year two and a half. So you're not that person. So you've outgrown them. You just simply need to look for a new coach and let them go. And maybe you're looking to move from a bricks and mortar business. I'm giving you some business examples just so you can see how this applies to everything. Maybe you're looking to move from a bricks and mortar business into a digital one, or a franchise model, or you even plan to sell it in a few years. So that coach who doesn't have that as their core expertise would be not the right one for you. Or maybe you need an additional one for a period of time, and then you let one go. Maybe even the one you brought on second, you let one go. So many different permutations, but something to keep in mind and be looking at. The boss, who worked her way up from a very junior position to an upper management position, but that takes no external training in anything and has never worked in any other company, let alone another industry. And there you are. You're armed with your growth strategy, and you've got a vision for where you want your life to go, and some great experience now at that job, and you're looking for a new opportunity, and whenever you talk about that, you're met with, well, why would you want to take that course? Or you just have to be here 5 years and then before you're eligible to do XXX or get promoted to such and such a job. That's an example of where you've outgrown your boss. Doesn't mean you're out earning them, but you're outgrowing them. So I've got a big question for you. Again, we're talking business here because I've given you some great relations of personal ones, so business ones. Can you have a client that you need to cut the cord with? Hell yeah! And that client, bizarrely enough, may actually be the one who brings in a substantial part of your overall revenue into your business. But it is a bad relationship. And maybe they were wrong to begin with and you needed the money to sustain your business. Maybe after working with them, you realize that they're draining all your energy and they aren't reflecting the results that they should have for that. And maybe they think of you as your 24/7, 365 personal solution robot. You're the problem-solving robot. And they don't respect your boundaries, or maybe you didn't set any. Or maybe they're not an ideal fit with all of your other clients. So I had that scenario. I am so familiar with it when I was building the summit. Midway through, my primary renter, another professional trainer who leased space, created a very unpleasant environment for my other clients. And then it was so bad at one point that I turned to my own mindset coach, and she told me this: it's your business, Debbie. You get to decide the rules. You get to decide whether she stays or goes. You get to decide if you are even there when she is. And yeah, okay guys, go ahead and guess what decision I made 8 years ago in my decade of poverty. Yeah, I decided to make sure I wasn't at the facility when she was scheduled to be there. I opted to avoid a difficult conversation. And why did I do that? Because I needed her revenue to cover my massive monthly rent payment. I totally didn't see, I was so tunnel focused on my money challenges in the business and personally that I honestly didn't see any other option. Like, I feel so stupid saying this because I'm a professional accountant. I've coached people, I've worked with people, I've built businesses with them and so on. But in my own damn business, I couldn't see that there were other almost immediate ways for me to replace that income that she was bringing in because I was so buried in trying to do everything by myself because I couldn't afford to hire anyone to do it. Anybody relate? So, there's your bonus lesson in this episode. Bring on help before you really think you need to, even when you think you're Superman or Superwoman. There are so many options out there. And if you're not sure, hit me up. I'll help you with that one. So before we end, let me share one last thing because I know there are millions of people out there with this challenge. What if it's mom or dad or immediate family, even one of your kids? Then, and yes, this is spoken from a wealth of personal experience. I've got 4 key things to do. Limit your time with them, but make sure what you do share is quality and non-judgmental time. Take breaks from them with honesty. Don't lie and make up fake excuses. Create your own traditions with your own family or circle. Stick to your personal core values. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about that one. My number one core value, you guys know what it is variety and uncertainty. Every time I go somewhere, leaving my parents' place, my mom says, let us know where you are when you get there. Send us a postcard every week. And you know how many times I've done that? 0. Because it violates my core value, and I recognize that my mother is a control freak. So those are my boundaries. And it's worked beautifully well for me. And this is said with love, with humor, with all those other things that you could add to it. When all else fails, move 3,000 miles away. That last one, it might sound harsh, but it literally has been the best thing I ever did for my relationship with my mom and dad. I moved to the other side of the country. I've moved to other countries. It has worked beautifully well for me. It's not an option for everybody. It just isn't. But don't rule out something if you want to improve the value of your circle reciprocally. Okay? So we're here. We're at the end. It's time for the question I ask you guys at the end of every episode, and I always encourage you to take some time, give it some thought. What is the worst thing that could happen if you unlock just one of your shackles today? Hey, if this podcast got you thinking, please make sure you're subscribed and share it with anyone who needs to hear this. The link is in the show notes, and please drop us a review on whatever podcast player that you're listening on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, you name it. And make sure that you drop over to our website, debbiecolburn.com /links / that's DEBBIECOLBOURN.com /links / to get our brand new 7-day quick action guide and to check out what's coming up in 2022. And please make sure that you're following us on LinkedIn and on Instagram, just to keep you on your toes, as a slightly different name, at MS Debbie Colburn.